Hi folks, I'm going to comment on something I saw on Facebook. I saw an icon that said LGBTP and some expletive pointing at the P, saying what is this basically, except with profanity implied. So anyway, I looked it up and I found out that on January 2nd on some Twitter feed, someone named, there's a picture here. If you look up on Twitter, someone named Dale S. wrote at hashtag above the hate. Dale S. at Dale's. Oh, anyway, he says, "My name is Dale Steinberg. I'm an advocate for fundamental human rights for all groups of society, primarily pedosexuals. Active member of Heart Progress, Stockholm, Sweden. Joined December 2016. Ouch. Yeah, so it gets some negative feedback from at least one poster here. Okay, so the question is pedosexual. Question I'd like to address is whether pedophilia, which is an inclination to have sex with children, okay, is a sexual orientation. Is that a genuine sexual orientation? And what we should, and some of our concerns that we should have with the legal framework that's being set up to protect sexual orientation, considering the fact that pedophiles could also use those same legal arguments and laws to protect pedophilia and to make pedophiles a protected legal class. Now this, if you're, no matter what side you are on in terms of LGBT being protected as a minority, you should consider this. Now, what does it mean to have sexual orientation as a protected class? Now, before the LGBT movement, decades before, there were psychologists who believed that homosexuals needed treatment, that was an aberrant desire and they may need treatment, and if people acted out on it, they could go to jail. Well, and the LGBT movement, before that, I guess the gay rights movement, whatever it was called, kind of organized itself, got very influential, started influencing people's thinking, including psychologists, and is very politically incorrect in some circles. It's considered very politically incorrect to say something that about if someone said that homosexuals needed psychological treatment, or to oppose the idea that it was perfectly normal and okay, then they could face some sort of social censorship from they could censored socially, or possibly they could face some problems within the psychiatric or psychological professions if professionals came out in favor of that idea. And also, academic articles, the people who review those, they may find that if someone took that position, they might be considered bigoted, that the articles might not make it into the research, might not make it into the mainstream journals, because the official dogma is LGBT, pro-LGBT. Now, what is the idea? Now, the idea that LGBT people promote is that we all have a sexual orientation, and that some people are oriented towards liking the opposite gender, and that some people are oriented towards liking the same gender. And many of them are kind of in favor of the idea that it's primarily the way they're born. And then, of course, there are nature versus nurture arguments, and there's some research to show that while identical twins that are raised separately, if one is homosexual, the other may be more inclined to be homosexual, but most of them are not. And so, there's nature versus nurture issues and things of that nature. This isn't really my area of research. I usually read stuff that's processed by some news agency on this particular topic. So, I'm not claiming to be a research expert in this area. My degrees are in another field. But I have had some academic training, and to me, it looks like a lot of this issue is really, a lot of it's political, and a lot of it, there's some groupthink, and there's kind of what's considered politically correct in order to accept the idea that, the LGBT stance on sexual orientation, that people are born with a certain orientation and should be a legally protected category. Now, what is sexual orientation? Sexual orientation has to do with preferences for, romance and sexual interest. Okay, so now the law is protecting people as minorities, based on their sexual inclinations, sexual orientation. And if certain states have laws that protect people from discrimination based on sexual orientation, and that's what they want to do sexually or who they're interested in. Okay, so the states protect that, sexual orientation. Isn't pedophilia a sexual orientation? Honestly, if you think about what that means, sexual orientation. Some man wants to have sex with other men, or some woman wants to have sex with other women. If that's a sexual orientation, that's an inclination to want to do that, or to have romantic interest or whatever. Well, the pedophiles, they want to do that with kids. Now, let's think about that. That's wrong to do that. I think most people would agree that it's wrong to do that to kids, no matter where you are on the LGBT whatever spectrum. Not everybody. Some people think that's okay. But most of us think that's wrong to actually do it. Now, what about the person who's not doing that, but they have that orientation? They like little kids. Personally, I think we should have full rights to discriminate against somebody with that sexual orientation. If I know that you are tempted to want to have sex with kids, and I own an apartment building that has kids in it, I should have full legal rights to discriminate against you fully. I should be allowed to deny you to rent in my house. I should be allowed to deny you employment at my company, at my kindergarten, if I owned a kindergarten or something like that, a private kindergarten, or at a private school. I should be allowed to discriminate against you because you have an inclination to want to do something bad. You have a sexual orientation that leads you to do bad things, if that's you. I should be allowed to discriminate against you. Don't you agree? Shouldn't discrimination be allowed in the case of sexual orientation of somebody who has pedophilia orientation? Now, some people say, no, there's only 3 orientations. That's all made up. People can want to do all kinds of crazy stuff. Who are we to say that somebody else doesn't want to do something like that? Who are we to invent the number of orientations that people can have? I can't say people don't want to do something bad. I can say that if they want to do something bad, the fact that they want to do it doesn't justify doing it. Okay? You can have some sexual desires, and just because you think you were born with them, or maybe you were born with them, I don't know, or maybe you developed them over time, maybe you had an inclination to it and moved in that direction, something nudged you that way and you're more inclined to it. Just because you have that desire, it does not make it right to act on it. And it is totally crazy for us to have a legal system that protects people based on their sexual desires, to make that into some sort of a legally protected category. That makes no sense whatsoever. It's crazy, and the pedophilia illustrates that. Sexual desire orientation should not be protected from discrimination. If somebody goes to a job interview and they start talking to you about who they want to have sex with, or stuff about their sexual interests or sexual preference, shouldn't you be able to not hire that person just because they brought it up? Now, if you're in business, you got to follow whatever laws are out there, as long as it's not something that's directly immoral. The law says kill somebody, you may have to disobey the law in some sort of cases. But it's crazy as far as having a society that would have laws that are written to protect such a broad category when there may be some small minority out there who are interested in animals and they claim that's their orientation, and you look at what an orientation is and the judge would have to say, well, yeah, I guess that is an orientation. They want to do it, and they've wanted to do it for a long time. There are how many thousand people in this research here that says that there are people who want to do that kind of stuff with animals. Well, shouldn't we have the right to discriminate against them? Shouldn't you have a right to keep them from working in the chicken house or the cow barn or whatever, the slaughterhouse or whatever it is, if you know that they have an inclination to that sort of thing, and especially if they bring it up in a job interview? That's so disgusting. So anyway, I think that this case, this pedophilia thing, illustrates that the sexual orientation laws that some of the states are passing, and university campuses especially, not to discriminate on sexual orientation, are extremely dangerous. I mean, it's a terrible thing to put in the law. And just look at the other protected categories. Race, okay, that makes sense. You can know where somebody's ancestors came from. You can know what they look like, skin color or whatever. or with a blonde hair or whatever. You can know somebody's race or ethnic background to some extent, or how they identity or whatever of they say what they are. You can know that makes sense. You can tell if somebody's male or female for discrimination. You can look on the birth certificate, or they can look on the birth certificate and know how old they are. So that makes sense. Discrimination for age, we can measure that. But the sexual orientation thing, people can claim whatever they want, and then why should what people want to do in that area of their life be a protected category? If somebody is, especially if you think about what that word means, sexual orientation, that could be so broadly interpreted in the future to include all kinds of nasty stuff, all kinds of dangerous people. What if somebody had a kind of a violent orientation, a rapist orientation? How are we to know if, just look at how much society has changed in terms of what it thinks about orientations and things like that, what should be protected? How are we to know that some judge somewhere isn't going to say that a rapist has a particular type of orientation and that you can't discriminate against him based on what he wants to do? Now, what he does may be illegal, but if somebody has an inclination to want to do that, you should be able to discriminate against him if he's applying for a job where having a desire to do that could put the people that work there at risk, and could put your company at risk, and could put children at risk. We need to protect people. And if you've got some really weird desires, if having the desires doesn't make it justified to act on them, and other people should be able to tell you that they don't like that, and that's free speech. So anyway, that's my commentary for today here on the LGBTP issue. And I would just like anybody out there who votes to take this kind of stuff into consideration when you're voting for officials. If you're involved in a university campus, back up on some of this insanity that's going on. Anyway, that's another topic. Thank you for watching.